And welcome to Sunday comic stream. Let's talk a little bit about some of the experiences of working as a freelancer that I had. Some little mistakes I had at the beginning. Alright, I haven't corrected this. But yeah. Let's so I don't want, and I cannot talk specifics because obviously let's protect the clients. But it was very interesting when I started getting jobs as a comic artist. At first it was easy, cheap things like in the Tapastic forum. There were things like paid collabs and stuff. I remember I priced myself $50 a page back then, and it was good. It was fun. I was learning, and I guess they were learning too. I think it was mutually beneficial. And that was easy, especially the ones, I have briefly talked about this, but the ones that have modern settings, such as modern US. But I really like historical inspired settings. That's what I mainly draw. I really like it. But it does require some research, and I think that's something I forgot when I accepted one of my first comics. And it makes sense that, the thing is, you have your process, right? And if you're just one person, you just do what works. You're like following literally the just do it rule. So it's not like you remember every single step of the process, or at least that's what happened to me. At the beginning of my comic, I did a mood board. I was choosing a country. I was making a Pinterest board full of patterns and backgrounds on how the comic was going to be made. In this case, Russian and Ukraine inspirations, but also whatever I liked. Also a little bit of House of the Prairie and wooden cabins stuff. And then for May, it's a lot of ancient inspired China, Minoans. At one point I was not doing it correctly and I was making all countries inspired on the same culture, which doesn't make sense. Now I have written down exactly which civilization is which, or inspired by what. And I realized that even though I wanted to avoid some politically incorrect things, my favorite civilization to be inspired in that comic was China, definitely. So I wanted, and it's a very fictional setting though, but I did have to research enough to not use any symbol that could be weird or disrespectful. But yeah, it's very, very much a fictional story, thank goodness, with lots of different cultures. Oh, so I did a combination, now I remember, between China and Rome, which I know it's weird, but that was the point. Weird enough where I'm not representing a character or someone that's actually real, because I wanted to be very careful with that. So when I got hired for, let's talk about one specific one, Rani of Jhansi, or Lakshmi Bai, which is a comic about this wonderful, incredible queen in India, in the little kingdom of Jhansi, that fought against the British to defend her people. And she died, but she was very important culturally and a very cool example of, to be honest, a strong woman. She was trained in arms and she knew how to fight. Actually, she's represented in a horse and she has her baby, her adopted son, at her back, which is a very cool image. I think when I researched her, there was something about, of course, she didn't ride with the son to battle, but it was like a romantic symbolism of stuff. But she did fight in the front lines. So, and I remember when I was working on this comic and finding out about this amazing woman from India, I was starting to believe some narrative that women couldn't do much regarding weapons and strength. And yeah, I know that we can do less maybe, but there's so many historical examples of pirates, princesses, generals, consorts. There's a lot of examples of women generals in ancient China, not only the legend, because this is indeed just a legend, Hua Mulan. But there were real women fighting and winning battles. I don't know. I was just believing it was not possible at one point, but there's the historical data, so that was very cool. There's no way I would do it personally, but I'm weak as fuck. But it's very cool to find out women that were trained from an early age, or just women that honestly behaved and looked more like a man. But it was, I don't know, I think it's fun to find those examples. But yeah, I remember when I was researching this figure, I was finding some challenges because I think I went straight on to work. I was very excited. But I did have to take a pause at one moment to be like, wait, how were the uniforms that the soldiers, these women, had? Because it's a lot of fun to research the clothes that the queen had. But yeah. And something that I like a lot, I didn't do this for this particular project because I didn't want to be too influenced, but I don't know if that's a mistake, is I like to see historical TV shows or movies, even if they're not super well made story-wise. I have no idea if the movie of this is good or not, but I like to see, their interpretation of the costumes, and I had to search a lot, and I was having like reference images for each page almost to make sure that I didn't fail. But also something I was doing in my personal comic that I realized I couldn't do in the freelance one is my process used to be I would do the entire comic page, like the whole process, sketch, layout, everything, to very detailed HB pencils, I think. And I would do everything on paper. And then I would take a picture with my phone, pass it to a program like this, to the computer. Back then it was Photoshop, I think. And and I would then do the inks on digital, which sounds good, but the problem is that I lean down too much to one side when I'm drawing digitally. Like I start to be like this, or like I'm like this. So I would end up correcting a lot, because I think the best tool I have in digital is the flip canvas option. So I would end up doing that so much that my process was very slow. I realized I was not really reaching the deadlines, because, of course, when I was doing my own comic, and I was doing it with lots of love, of course, that's what inspired the client to hire me. But I had, I guess, more time. I was less strict about when I was going to be finished. I didn't even know. I knew that my speed was going to be way slower, also because the client hired a tier that wanted lots of detail. This was one of my first big projects, so I was excited to give it my best every page. Of course. But yeah, so I started to do the whole process digitally. And I was actually surprised that I was not as bad as I thought I was going to be, because, I mean, one of the reasons I was doing the traditional method first is because I thought I was better that way. And I didn't want to forget. To this day, all my sketchbooks are traditionally made. I know there are some people that do practice digitally only, but I want to have something that ties me to pencil and paper. But yeah, that was two of the things. The research part I didn't take fully into account, and there was a whole pause of me doing lots of research per every page. I will explain a bit how the client gave me the script. And then there was also the method not being fast enough. Like, there's one thing to talk about quality, yes, but in my case particularly, I was a little bit too relaxed with my own personal comic. It's like, yeah, nobody is really rushing me. I was trying to be fast, but at the end of the day, I didn't have deadlines, which I do think was a slight mistake. By the way, I forgot to say, last week I hurt myself. This week I'm perfectly fine. Thank goodness. Maybe not to work 6 hours in a day, but enough to work 2 hours or more. I think I'm gonna be perfectly fine. It was caught on time. But yeah, let's not talk too much about it, because that's boring. I already talked a lot about it. But yeah, whatever. The point is, that was the other lesson. Another thing I was doing with my comic, my personal comic, that I had to take into account, not to maybe necessarily do with the freelancer one, is every page I did, and to an extent sometimes I do this as well, but every page I did, because I was not, I will never consider me a perfect artist, and we all have those insecurities, right? Like, I had this heavy imposter syndrome. Of course, my ego was very happy that I got hired. I was like, yes, I'm working as a comic artist. I was aching for that so bad, and I really wanted to do an awesome job. But the imposter syndrome, oh my god, it was very bad in that moment. But something I did then in my personal comic is that every page I would challenge myself with something new. Like, oh, let's say, I don't know, perspective, 1 point perspective, let's say, right? So I wouldn't really take a whole tutorial back then. I would just take it during the process of making a comic page, which made me slower, but I was learning in a way I cared about the end result a lot. It didn't feel as boring as just, oh, I'm just gonna learn all the perspectives. It felt purposeful. And I don't think that was bad. I was an amateur comic artist, definitely. I was just learning. And I learned a lot during that style of doing things. Right now I deleted that comic, sorry. But I can even, I may upload these pages to Patreon. But you can see that the style is not necessarily that cohesive. There's little new things I was doing, like the beginning of the comic. I didn't even do shadows, for example, just because I was very overwhelmed and I didn't want to mess with it until I got hired by someone else. This is another client. They were capitalizing a little bit. Oh, I'm so sorry about it. I failed them. They were capitalizing a bit on me continuing to grow popularity on Tapastic. So they were even paying me to continue my own comic, which was awesome. I was, of course, doing some designs they were asking for, but it was a very short assignment. But, and one of the things they did say is like, what the hell is with your perspective? It's so bad. And I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that was not all of them, just one of them. And he was completely right. It was so bad in one of them. I just literally was lazy. It was not me trying and doing a bad job just because I'm a beginner. It was just me being lazy. I literally didn't want to repeat a background, so I just scaled it and tried to distort the image, and it didn't really look good. I mean, it was understandable, but what I was trying to do. But I was being very lazy. Well, but going back, oh my god, sorry. If I don't have a script, I ramble, but I'll try to. So in the freelancer comic, I was trying so hard. It's very difficult to me 3-point perspective background. It took me a whole day because I didn't stop to learn it and then apply it to the page. I just went directly to try to do something I didn't know how to do. This was page number 2. And it was only for one panel. So I was suffering so much because something I didn't understand about perspective, which I'm gonna recommend a course. I forget the name right now. I'm just gonna write it down in the comments or something. But I used to do perspective in paper, remember? So this is the paper, let's say. I was very confused how I was gonna be able to do a 2-point perspective in such a tiny page. I didn't understand I could put the points outside the composition. Like, here's your drawing. Here are the points, the vanishing points. And there's a whole little practical ideas on how to do this. Like, if the points are 2 together, then it's gonna look very weird. They need to be far apart, and it's ideal if this is longer than this one. You know, like, there's little optimal tips on how to do this. I'm sorry I'm not being detailed right now, but this is not a perspective course. But it was this guy, oh my god. Well, I found it in Udemy, and I'm gonna write down the course because I did learn a lot from that little cheap Udemy course. And the cool thing about Udemy courses is that once you buy them, they're yours forever. Or at least so far. Unlike many subscription services things. I'm gonna write down the perspective thing. I don't want to forget because there's so many YouTubers that say, I'm gonna add this in the description, and they never do it. I'm gonna write it down. Udemy perspective course, so I don't forget to tell you. But yeah, I spent easily days in that page. I was embarrassed. Okay, but one of the most useful things, and I think this is super, super, super important, is that my client was one of those that let me do whatever I wanted. And that moment with the Lakshmi Bai comic, they were the writers, and they were like, well, just do it. They would pay me per package, let's say, like for example, they pay 5 pages, and then until I deliver the 5 pages, they give me the rest of the 50% of payment. So that way, of course, they can also prevent you scamming them, because there's many artists, sadly, that are terrible people. But we talk a lot about bad clients, but there's also bad artists, sadly. I know about it because of the YouTube drama. But it's just a way to trust each other. Like I really like that method of 50% payment of work, especially at the beginning, little packages, and then they give you the rest once you deliver the work. And then they know they can trust you to pay for the next package. So we were working like that. But I had no real deadlines at all. And it was among my first freelancer projects. And I did think, okay, this is going to be embarrassing to admit, but let's do it. I was so burnt out by the moment I took this project. And there's a difference between recognizing that you need vacation and not telling your client I'm taking the vacation. I was not really even acknowledging to myself that I was doing that. I was really trying to work, but I was procrastinating a little bit more than I should, especially because I was losing my mind on that, trying to learn on the go instead of understanding the concept and then applying it to the page. So I think one very important thing freelancers should do, or at least that's what I do, is even if I get clients now that tell me you can do whatever you want and I'm not gonna check on you, I insist on putting deadlines to myself. Like my last client, he was asking me for a finance book. I was doing comics, don't worry. It was gag comics. I don't know what I'm gonna do here. I'm not gonna try. In the drawing. I would try to have a video call every Friday. Now it was difficult because my client would go on a trip very often and he wasn't necessarily wanting to do it, but I would have to myself that my deadline was Friday, and on Wednesday I would try to tell him like, hey, this is how it's going, even though he never requested it. Like, I could have done the same that I did at the beginning when I was more inexperienced. But I knew that if I didn't put deadlines to myself, it was so easy for me to procrastinate. Again, because I had too much ambition. Sometimes perfectionism makes you procrastinate way more. I'm so glad I'm not a perfectionist to my own standards anymore. I have already talked about this. But yeah, the most important thing is to keep your client informed, and ideally that you agree to set days. My client knew that every Friday. There was a point he started to procrastinate himself. He was like, nah, just, deliver the work. I'm gonna check it once you have like a lot of work for me to check. And that was fine. I did upload to Drive what he had already paid for, because he also, this was my last client again, he didn't keep track of how much money he paid me. So I also became sort of like a project accountant. And if I wanted to, which of course I will never do, this doesn't go according to my character, I could have lied easily. I could have said, hey, you owe me X, and he wouldn't have known. But just, that's not the person I am. But, you find clients that are different. I think he needs to be careful in his life. But, well, thank goodness he and I are even friends. Kind of. Yeah, no, we're friends. So, and I would keep track of everything in a Notion page with a database full of what package was which, if it was already paid. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about the organization later, but that should actually be a video, because this is a very unorganized stream. Hello, Agisa. I'm so glad to see you. You're saying Udemy is pretty handy. I used a graphic design course on there years ago to cover the basics after my school didn't do the best job. Yeah, I can imagine. But good on you for taking charge of that. So you bought a perspective book. I'm so glad it was helpful. Which one was it? Because I have heard of people getting confused by the math of perspective books. Like it seems a little bit too complicated. So the course I'm going to suggest was very basic, maybe, but it was enough for me to get started. And the rest, what I did, which I'm going to suggest here, is in this sketchbook. I cannot even see myself, so hopefully you can see this. I'm just going to put it in front of my face. So I just selected some backgrounds in Pinterest that I liked, and I drew them, and then I would analyze what perspective it was. And I would just do little boxes to figure out, like, oh, this seems to be the perspective of this cool thing. Like, oh, it looks so complicated and full of detail, but it's just boxes. Boxes and more boxes. Like, if you can do a box, you can do a building. Just, it's gonna take you more time to do the little windows and details. I don't know if it's visible here. Probably not. My light is very bad. But yeah, well, whatever. The point is made. I would choose very cool backgrounds I really liked that seemed complicated from comics or Pinterest, and then I would draw them, and then I would try to see where the boxes were. And even when I did my own drawing, I was figuring out the perspective afterwards, and then I knew what perspective to use when I passed it to digital. So for very complicated backgrounds, I would indeed suggest maybe having a couple of layout designs as ideas before passing it to your final form. I don't know. Very cool. I'm gonna also copy paste what you're writing here, Agisa. Thank you. It's the book that Agisa checked for perspective. Vanishing Point by Cheeseman Mayer. I think I spelled his name right. Cheeseman? That's funny. Is that real? Well, whatever the case, I'm copying this because I think all artists, we can benefit from perspective. Yeah, Cheeseman Mayer. Okay, that's a very cool. It does look like a cool book, honestly. Oh, also, yeah, perspective of figures. I focus on the city ones. So yeah, I should take this actually. Thank you, Agisa. How are you? I hope your projects are fine. But yeah, okay. I think I mentioned, let's just say, I mentioned the main things about when I was working for myself versus working for someone else. Number one was what technique I was going to use to be faster. In this case, me doing the whole process digitally. I love traditional. I love pencil. But someone else was paying me to do their project, and I was very honored. I wanted to do a good job, and I was very slow at the beginning for these little mistakes I was making. 2, clear communication. Realize if you actually need rest. There's nothing wrong with saying, yeah, we're gonna start the project not tomorrow, but in a week. And give yourself 1 week of rest if you're burned out. There's a book called Rest. Read it. So you don't feel like you're being lazy just because you are not a robot and you need rest. And keeping constant communication with the buyer. The more often, the more ideal. Also, you'll be more motivated. It's cool to be like, look at what I did for you. It's very cool when you have a client that doesn't want much corrections and they're happy with your style. Okay, Agi, so I don't worry too much about the specific numbers with perspective. I am for believable more than accurate. Yeah, I think that's key with perspective, especially cool backgrounds. I feel sometimes when we're trying to do perspective at the beginning, we limit ourselves because we have this very cool city in our head, maybe. But the perspective we're able to do, or we think we're able to do, is very basic. But I would say, even in a piece of paper, like even in a post-it, like don't take it seriously. Do the very cool city, just the layout again, and you get the perspective from there, and then you do the very cool city, because I feel like it's very easy to limit yourself. And to be honest, when I got hired, I didn't feel like I had the best backgrounds, but I put in lots of effort to achieve what I had in my head. And to be fair, the client hired me for me. So even if I didn't think I was perfect, they were willing to spend their precious money on me. And of course, I was not going to let them down, but there's also some recognition to yourself of, hey, just do your best. They already know how you draw. And right now, I'm not working with any client in any drawing thing. I'm going to continue this comic, and I'm actually going to have lots of time. Not lots, but more than usual to advance the comic, thank goodness. And again, I'm better injury-wise. So expect to see more, which I'm excited. Yeah, if you have any questions or you want me to talk about something else. Oh, okay, I guess it says, as far as my projects, I made a lot of progress. That's cool in the character head turnaround sheet. I just need to do the odd angles, yeah. But that's very, very cool. Yeah. Character sheets are fun. Sometimes. I never do them, but I think in the big comic I should. But yeah, let's do that later. Well, hope everyone is doing well. I need to go. I actually have a party to go to, but I'm gonna draw so much tomorrow. I'm so excited. At least in the morning. Later I do have things to do. But yeah, take care. Bye.